Unit 6, Political Geography. For these notes, we'll cover 3 content objectives. First content objective is 6.1, recite the distribution of ethnicities. Content objective number 2, describe how ethnicities can transform into nationalities. And content objective number 3, 6.3, explain how ethnicity differences can cause conflict. 6.1, recite the distribution of ethnicities. Your I can statements are: define ethnicity and race. 2, explain the major ethnicity distributions in the U.S. 3, explain the distribution of major ethnicities in U.S. urban areas. Ethnicity is traditions of a specific homeland. When we talk about ethnicities, they are deeply rooted traditions that go back many millennials, traced back to the homeland in the form of their language, in the form of their customs, in the form of their rituals. Race, on the other hand, is the identity of people that it has a biological link. Biological can pertain to physical characteristics, as seen here. This is an antiquated term. It does not accurately describe people, and we'll cover that today. When we talk about ethnicities, Hispanics is the term that was adopted in 1973 because it was more fitting to the Spanish-speaking population. They account for 15% of the U.S. population. They're clustered in the southwestern region. The highest concentration is in California. African Americans account for 13% of our total population. They're clustered in the southeast. They're the largest concentration of African American ethnicity is in Mississippi. Asian Americans represents 4% of the total population of the U.S., and they are clustered in the West Coast, and the largest concentration is in California and Hawaii. And then American Native Indians account for 1%, and they're clustered in the Southwest and dispersed in the Plain States, and the largest concentrations in Arkansas and Oklahoma. And the ethnicity that is the largest, which accounts for roughly 65%, is the white ethnicity. We look at the distribution across the entire United States. We can see ancestry comes from various nationalities. The white ethnicity is not the most accurate way to describe a person of ancestral cultures that is white, because there are many different nationalities, such as Dutch, English, Finnish, French, German. But we can also take a look at other ancestry nationalities that make up the white ethnicity as other ethnicities. The diversity map is showing strictly, in this diversity, it's showing diversity in terms of ethnicity. Diversity can be many things, but in this case, it's ethnicity and diversity, where California is the highest diversity in ethnicity. So we can see California fitting a melting pot theory. How are they distributed within cities? 90% of cities' ethnic makeup are African Americans and Hispanics. They migrated to cities for jobs. It goes back to the Great Migration in the early 1900s. Many African Americans fled the South because of the elimination of sharecroppers, because of mechanization of farming in the Second Agricultural Revolution. So they fled to economic opportunities in urban centers with manufactured output that was being produced in factories. And same with Hispanics, and they became clustered in major cities. We look at the 7-county metropolitan area. We can see the clustering, we can see the distribution of American Indian, with the American Indian representing a small percentage of the overall metropolitan area, but we can see some enclaves and would be Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, and then also we can see some in the northern western suburbs. We look at Asian. Again, Asian is located near the city, the 2 major cities, St. Paul and Minneapolis. We can look at Black or African American, Black American ethnicity, and we can see that they are in enclaves as well, located near St. Paul and Minneapolis. And then we can see the white population, and that's the largest population. Um, when Minnesota is one of the higher populations of white ethnicity of the states in the U.S., as you can see within the metro area. Moving on to objective 6.2, describe how ethnicities can transform into nationalities, and 6.3, explain how ethnicity differences can cause conflict. Focusing on 6.2, describe how ethnicities can transform into nationalities. Your I can statements, describe key characteristics of the apartheid in South Africa. 2, describe key characteristics of Jim Crow laws in the United States. 3, explain the concept of nation and nation states. And 4, discuss how centripetal and centrifugal forces can influence nationalism. The United States, slavery existed prior to the 13th Amendment, which was passed after the Civil War. Actually during the Civil War, the 13th Amendment was passed. And then what happened is then as a result to that, the 13th Amendment, then there was Jim Crow laws that were imposed in the South, in the southern regions that were the former Confederacy. And those Jim Crow laws were indicated separate institutions for both black and whites, as you can see in the pictures, separate drinking fountains, separate buses, transportation systems, schools, etc. And that was reinforced by Plessy versus Ferguson, the country mandate, legislative mandate stated that everything was separate but equal, but in all reality it wasn't equal. And that led to segregation in Jim Crow laws, segregation of the two ethnicities, white ethnicity and black ethnicity in the South. Jim Crow laws, and you'll learn this in American history, we see Jim Crow laws in some cases even alive today. South Africa, when we look at separating people, this is more imposed by the government of a physical separation. So Jim Crow laws were legislation that said separate but equal, but in South Africa, apartheid meant physical separation. People were put into 4 racial groups. There was restrictions on schools, jobs, rights, living, political representation. They were repealed with the help of Nelson Mandela and the Premier de Klerk in the 1990s, but effects are still felt today, much like the Jim Crow laws. Nationality is the identity of a group who share a legal attachment to a specific country. You again, think of your nationality. All of us we have a different ethnicity. We can have a different gender. We could have a different religion, but we all have the same nationality if we're legal, that is, and that is a U.S. citizen. Both ethnicity and nationality can be defined by cultural values. Distinction between the two can be difficult because oftentimes ethnicity is tied into that allegiance to the adherence to a state, that oftentimes that state is the homeland where they developed ancestral values. So it's oftentimes difficult to distinguish between the two concepts. Can two nations exist in the same country? For sure they can, like we see with French Canadian in the Quebec region of Canada, in the Catalans in Catalonia in Spain. But each of those two areas have had movements towards separatism, which has led to a possible separation within those countries. Ethnic groups seek self-rule. It's called self-determination. Some ethnic groups seek to create their own countries through this self-determination. It happens through separatist movements. Nation states are countries that are very homogenous. They have very similar ethnicities, cultural religions, language. They're very homogenous, like in Denmark, Germany, France, Japan, some of the former republics of the Soviet Union, like the Baltic regions, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Kurdish is a stateless nation. It's a nation, a group of people that have an allegiance to that area of land, but they don't have a state. They don't have sovereignty boundaries where they control. They have government control of internal affairs and external affairs, so they're a stateless nation. Nationalism is the pride or loyalty to a state. State is synonymous with country. So in the United States, we are one state with 50 subdivisions of our state of the United States. And loyalty we see as centripetal forces, brings people to increase nationalism through festivals, symbols, the symbol of the American flag, songs, the national anthem, the U.S. flag, symbols. Other symbols can be freedom symbol, the American eagle symbol. Centripetal, again, is found through increased nationality. Sports is another great example of centripetal force. Centrifugal is dividing nationality, forcing people apart. As we see right now in our political climate in 2020, we are an extremely divided nation between Republicans and Democrats, and oftentimes that is echoed through this 45th president's administration of conservatives and liberals. So we can see that as a centrifugal force that's been fueled by the government. And we see regionalism, we can see economics. When people don't have equality, equal resources to accomplish economic opportunities, it can be a centrifugal force. And ethnicity can also be a centrifugal force, as we saw in 2020 with the George Floyd police brutality and the protest. That was an ethnic centrifugal force. Multinational states is when you have two or more nationalities that have self-determination but they coexist. A great example of a multinational state is the United Kingdom. There's several nations, Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales, that come together as one multinational state. And they can change over time. Here we have the former USSR. The republics are seen in the colors other than yellow. Russia is the largest multinational state. It has over 39 nationalities. There's some areas like in Chechnya, in the Caucasus region, so in the southeast region of Russia, where they have areas that are predominantly Muslim, and they also have distinct difference than the Slavic ethnic Russians. And Chechnya is an example where they fused to be a part of Russia, but they were not allowed to break up when USSR broke up into their former republics. And again, it's been on and off again, fighting for over 10 years in this Caucasus region. And here's the Caucasus region down here, southwestern portion of Russia. All right, there's a picture of the Caucasus region. All right, and then we can see when we look at civil conflict, the most civil conflict is in areas where they're DTM stage 2, where there's political instability and economic instability. So we look at sub-Saharan Africa, they're at very high risk, Northern Africa at high risk, Southwest Asia and South Asia, and then parts of Central and South America. That's a wrap.